Welcome back, everybody. Hope everybody's well. Thank you all for being here and joining us for another Illia series, Twitter Spaces and podcast. We're switching up the format a little bit, so expect to see some podcast format videos on YouTube to be able to watch them after. Today, we're joined by two amazing people, Illia, co-founder of NEAR, as well as Theodore Blackman, CTO of Urbit Foundation. Today's Twitter Spaces is all about the Near and Urbit partnership, what exciting things are in the pipelines, what this partnership is going to lead to, anything exciting on the Urbit side as well. A lot of amazing developments to kind of look forward to. And without further ado, I will go ahead and let the speakers introduce themselves and get into the topics today. And just on that note, we will try to actually open up the floor at the end, actually, for Q&A as usual. So if you have any questions throughout, save them for the end, and we'll try to get to you. But yeah, Theodore, over to you.
All right. Hello. Thanks for having me. Yeah, my name's Ted Blackman. I'm CTO of Urbit Foundation, and I've been working on Urbit for 6.5 years, most of which as a core developer, and I've been managing people the last couple of years. And before that, I had a pretty normal career in startups for a while. I've been doing that for a long time. Yeah, and we've been working with NEAR now for over 6 months, right? And I've talked to Illia a few times, and it's always so. I'm excited to be here.
Hello, Ted. Yeah, awesome to have you here. I'm Illia, co-founder of NEAR. It's great to have this new episode and having Ted and kind of Urbit joining us. So let's kick it off. I guess to start, let's introduce Urbit to the audience.
So Urbit is a personal server, and it's a network of those personal servers. It's a peer-to-peer network. And the idea of Urbit is really that computing should be done better from all the bottom layers all the way through the top. And so that goes all the way down to machine code, programming language, operating system, network protocol, identity system. All of that is inside of Urbit. It's all done in a very unusual way that's designed to be timeless. And it's designed to be modern. So it's, the current internet stack that we use was built on, 50-year-old technology. And a lot of the problems that we think of as social problems on the internet, things with, ads and censorship and just some lack of composability of applications, you can trace the origins of those back to technical limitations of the underlying protocols. This is Urbit's core thesis. And so we're trying to do it right. And we're trying to do it right sort of in a way that continues to be right as hardware changes and as the way that people use computers evolve. And so a big piece of that is that each person should have their own full computer that's a server, meaning other people can find that computer and send requests to it, and it can send responses back. And your laptop is actually not like this. Your phone is not like this. They're clients, they're not servers. And so with Urbit, the idea is that each person should be running an operating system that acts as a server. And then these servers can be peers of each other. And so they can all communicate in peer-to-peer networks. And you can have almost all the major applications that we use these days could be replaced by decentralized alternatives, where you don't have to have some central server somewhere that is either serving you ads or that you have to pay in order to use the service. And we think that will lead to a better world, a more humane way of using computing. And it dovetails very well with what Illia has described as the open web concept. So Urbit itself is not exactly a crypto project. The ownership of Urbit network addresses is registered on a blockchain. But other than that, it itself is not a blockchain and is very much not a traditional crypto project in a lot of ways. However, because it's building toward that same world, a lot of our users are crypto people, and a lot of the relationships we have with other organizations and the use cases we see for Urbit are crypto related. And so NEAR is the flagship integration that we have with sort of the rest of the crypto world.
Awesome. Thanks for introducing. And yeah, you touched on the open web. I think it's worth kind of expanding on this because indeed, kind of we've been talking about this, I think like since 2019, really trying to bring back some of the concepts where the internet was built on open permissionless protocols and everybody was kind of building this big, permissionless network early on, you know, in, and connecting to everyone, right? And like early on, actually, everybody kind of had a server as well. And as they were connecting in, early versions of email server, like, you would run your own email server, you would run your own FTP server, you would run your own other kind of interactions. And then, we had this kind of massive centralization power that happened as Web2 introduced these platforms, which had network effects through content, through data and interactions that users put into them, that then, by the virtue of having kind of it all in one place, meant this place became more and more interesting and people wanted to join and kind of becoming participants versus becoming becoming users of the of specific service versus being participants in the protocols. And Web3 is trying to turn this around kind of conceptually. And this is where I do like to use, Web3 open web instead of crypto, because crypto, I think, is a primitive. It's a financial and kind of economic primitive that enables blockchains, but Web3 is way broader space that allows to connect a lot of different technologies into this new self-sovereign way of doing things. Now, one important moment to note is similarly how, when protocols were designed, everybody has their own server, you had their own email kind of server, then you have Gmails and Hotmails and Yahoo. You can interconnect them and you can send emails between them. And I think one of the things we are seeing right now, which kind of is happening, is that like it's actually pretty complicated to connect these different networks that are being built in Web3. And so one of the things that we as NEAR are trying to do, and why it's excited to partner with Urbit, but also with a whole host of other Web3 projects, is to really interconnect all this back and really create this, we call it chain abstraction, kind of a unified way of interacting with the whole Web3 space. So maybe on this note would be kind of worth diving into how do developers and users right now can interact with Urbit, and as well, maybe we can discuss the interesting ways, kind of how NEAR decentralized front ends as well as other parts of stack can be fitting into this.
Yeah, so in terms of how to get onto Urbit, there are a few ways. So Talon and Red Horizon both have hosting products, so that allows you to get on in just a few clicks very easily. And then you can have your own what's called an Urbit planet, which is an Urbit node. And then once you have that, then you can interact with it from your phone and through a web browser, both. And so I have an Urbit app on my phone. That's what I mostly use to interact with Urbit, and sometimes I use the web app on my laptop. And the thing is that's it's interacting with just my Urbit, right? So my clients are just talking to my Urbit, not anybody else's. So it's really sort of my little cloud, my little piece of the cloud. And then in terms of if you're a developer, it's pretty easy to get spun up to write an Urbit application, and then distributing the application to users is as easy as just having that code live in your Urbit, and you run a command to say make it public, and then anyone on Urbit can download your application. You can post links to it, and there's something that looks and feels like an app store, but it's fully decentralized on Urbit, and so that's it's very easy to make and distribute an Urbit application. And that application will run on the back end. So it'll run on everyone's servers. And then there's also, typically when you write an Urbit app, there's also a client-side component. So there's, the the web app that runs in the client side of the web app that runs in a web browser or on a phone. And so you do have to write that yourself, right? As if you were writing a normal, Web 2 web app, and you can do it the same way. And you can distribute that code along with the backend code. And then something that we're working on with NEAR is actually making it so that you could also have that code be distributed by putting it onto the NEAR chain, and then using NEAR as a BOSS system, their blockchain operating system, to distribute the code from the chain, which has some nice security properties, among other things.
Yeah, I think the kind of one of the things that really increased the interest in this was this idea that I, as a user, want to have some private data that lives somewhere. If I lose my phone, I don't want to lose all my private data as well. And at the same time, making it possible to interconnect with other, through applications with other people, with other communities. And at the same time, linking this still back into all of the rest of the Web3 space, which we have. Kind of Web3, blockchains are more about public, kind of shared information, right? Be that, balances or, social, like with NEAR social or other parts, right? That's more about public shared data. And Urbit really offers this kind of private or community scoped data as well. And so joining this kind of two different functionalities, right, under one roof, under one set of ways of building front ends and applications is really powerful, because now it allows you to have self-sovereignty across kind of a variety of different forms of kind of storing and interacting with kind of backend and data stored there. And so for me, I think that maybe worth discussing is what are the cool applications and use cases that you already see on Urbit, but also how we can maybe marry more with Web3, with blockchain, with kind of crypto economics, such that maybe give some ideas to people what they can build in coming months.
Yeah, I was actually talking to Thomas, who's the deputy director of the Urbit Foundation, earlier today, and we were just discussing that one thing that I don't know if we're going to build it at UF or try to get somebody else to build it, but ideally incept some startup founder into doing it. But the one thing that would be really great to see would be a podcast player on Urbit, right? And so it would feel sort of like maybe Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Patreon, something like that, but fully decentralized. And then the way it would work is you could have a browser client for it, or a phone app, and the back end wouldn't have to do very much. It would just store sort of how far what the files are that you're listening to or watching, and how far along you are in those, at least the basic version of that. So that would be a pretty easy thing to build, which is part of why it's exciting. And then the next thing that would make it exciting is if you made it so that you could use crypto to subscribe to some content, right? So maybe pay $5 a month to get the latest episodes of some podcast, and or the latest blog posts. You could do the same thing with a text. And something interesting there is that it's not that easy to do subscriptions with crypto as it is, right? You really need some piece of code that's running on your behalf somewhere that keeps running, and then once a month, sends another $5 to keep the thing online, right? And so since your Urbit is running all the time, it's a server and you control it, this is something that your Urbit could do for you very easily. You could have a little hot wallet, in an app on your Urbit, and then that could just keep all of your media subscriptions open, right? And then have a nice user experience where you don't have to think about that. You don't have to open something up and dig out your hardware wallet, every 2 weeks or whatever, just to listen to the your latest Mr. Beast episode.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting idea to use Urbit pretty much as your kind of cron job for your on-chain activity, right? And
Yeah.
like you can expand it beyond that, to a full like if this then that, where you pretty much like, hey, you know, if if this happens, like if it rains and send $5 to this, or
Or write a
unsubscribe
trading
from
bot.
that. Yeah, well, I mean, trading bot is like the epiphany of that, but probably like for more kind of user level
Mhm.
experience things, right? You can just like define rules, be that like do this monthly or do that. Yeah, that's an interesting idea, and kind of, yeah, on top of that, you can build other different applications. I think the other interesting part as well is, yeah, like using pretty much uh, potentially the Urbit as a way to kind of proxy for decrypting some of the data that, let's say, the podcast itself, content is encrypted, but you're getting provisioned a key that, authorized to decrypt it. And so you have like a proxy encryption kind of scheme that's happening. So there's like
Okay, yeah.
interesting ways to kind of engage, what are servers to do more additional work to really create like end-to-end kind of encryption and permissioning system.
Yeah, that is interesting. The yeah, we're working on a system right now that is a little simpler than proxy re-encryption, but would let would let a one Urbit, ideally that even something that's just on your laptop, be able to publish content to a large group of people, and that is encrypted, publish it efficiently, um, and then ideally sort of elastically scale up to be like a content delivery network through Urbit's relay system, right? So we have these super nodes called stars and galaxies, and that really should facilitate something where like, well, I'm an individual, I'm publishing something on my laptop, but then if a lot of people start asking for it, then there's a relay in the cloud that people are asking. They're asking through that relay to get to me, and so if the relay can cache that content, then the requests don't have to come all the way to my laptop on my personal small internet connection, which crapped out earlier in this call already, and and then it could be served from a big data center. Um, so that's a lot of what we think about too, is like, how can you make it so that as an individual, it could still feel like when you're running Urbit, it could still feel like you have all the cloud at your disposal, right? And because I think there's something there where you know there's a flip side of sort of giving everyone, like giving individuals like control and freedom over their computing and data, which is that once you have control, you also bear the responsibility for it. Right. And you really feel this when you own crypto, right? And then if you own it with your hardware wallet, it's like, or any kind of private key, if you lose it, it's just gone, right? There's nobody you can go to and say, hey, please give it back to me. Right. So that's sort of an extreme example, but even when it just comes to your computational resources, like if you wanted to publish something, or if you wanted to publish it on a website, like you better use some sort of system to distribute that throughout the whole cloud, right? Like content delivery network. And yeah, so so this is something we think about with Urbit, try and make sure that this stuff scales up sort of seamlessly when an individual gets popular.
I guess like what is a financial incentive for Planet and Star, for Star and Galaxy to pretty much cash and not
You'd pay them.
redirect the
You'd pay them for
requests?
it. Yeah, and maybe they charge you more that month if you get a lot of hits, right? Either that, or they say, hey, you need a premium plan if you want to get so you have to pay whatever, $25 a month instead of $10 a month.
Is there Urbit Plus?
Yeah, Urbit Deluxe, Urbit Royale, yeah.
Urbit Premium, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is generally the point you touched on, though, is really important, is kind of the basic primitives are of self-sovereignty, like kind of leave the user at a at a disadvantage to a level that they need to now care about everything that's happening, right? And understand in pretty deep level, right? Or they get, scammed or lose their assets or data. And so I think on the product side, figuring out how to make it simpler and more straightforward to not worry about that, right? A lot of like investment we made early on was making our account model such that you can have multiple keys. You can have, potentially a recovery system that, relies on your social connections or even on trusted parties who have kind of specific rules when they can recover your account, such that even if you lost your kind of primary key, you can still have access. And so I think like the more systems like that are really important, both on kind of access and ownership, but also on data, compute resources to really uh, hide the complexity of this technology while providing experience that's ideally better than what is currently possible in Web 2.
Yeah. Yeah. We think about this a lot in Urbit that, either, for Urbit to sort of be something that people care about, it either has to do something that nothing else can do for them, or it has to do something that something else can do, but so much better than that it's worth switching, right? And the privacy benefits, the sovereignty benefits, all those things are real, but they're very rarely enough from a product perspective to get somebody to switch from using something else. And a lot of what we think about with regards to this is what we call zero-click maintenance. Right? So once you have your Urbit up and running, it needs to keep itself running, right? And as opposed to trying to run your sort of typical Linux server that's running a lot of applications on there, like those things usually require a lot of updates, a lot of upkeep. You have system administration tasks, and there's you have to know a lot and be willing to spend a lot of time and fix a lot of problems in order to keep those things running. They're very much intended for industrial use, not personal use, right? And this is why we have to say personal server and not just server, right? Because if we go tell people like, okay, just go run a server, and they run away screaming, if they even know what it means, and they should, right? They should run away screaming. Nobody should have to do this. It's it's cruel and unusual. So yeah, that's a lot of what we put effort into, is making sure that Urbit stays running, keeps itself up to date. It has a lot of user control over which apps need to stay running if it updates, right? If some apps update but the system doesn't, and we've actually kind of built out a fair amount of infrastructure for decentralized app updates and app migration, that I think we should probably write about it at some point, actually, because I don't think anybody else has really explored those lines of thought, and they're pretty important when you actually have a decentralized network and people are running different versions of a chat app and different versions of an operating system, different versions of network protocol, and keeping all that stuff running when you can't just shut down the server and update everybody and bring it all back up, right? Because decentralized.
Yeah, I mean, this is actually a very interesting question, because I mean, back in the day, then before like auto updaters became like a really predominant thing, right? People would keep the old clients for a long time until they like completely start breaking because like of some breaking changes.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's even worse for kind of server level software, because yeah, the updates coming out and kind of you expect it to keep it up to date. Pretty. I think for me, the interesting thing I always found kind of in like the blockchain as a tool has been a very useful for this kind of continuous protocol innovation, right? So the example I like is IPv4, right? So the IP addressing from TCP/IP stack, that's a very old technology. IPv6 was designed in end of 90s, if I remember correctly. It was
Sounds right.
standardized and accepted like in beginning of 2000s. And we're still not on it. I'm like pretty sure my computer is still on the IPv4 right now.
Yeah, I think it's about 20% of routers support it, something like that, which is not enough to really use it.
Yeah, it's not enough. But even if your router supports it and your computer supports it, it's still not like automatically like upgrades into it, right? And so what's interesting about kind of blockchain is like you can actually achieve this global consensus about that, like everybody's ready to upgrade, and like or majority is ready to upgrade, and now kind of it is happening.
This is a user activated soft fork, right?
Yeah, and so Near actually we build that in directly into protocol that as new versions get released, the validators vote kind of as part of consensus that they want to upgrade to a new version. And then when there's kind of a super majority voted in, there's like an automatic like with delay upgrade that happens. And so you need to maintain the one version before, so all validators can run previous version to be able to kind of participate as you update the software, participate in the current consensus. But it allows to have like this rolling upgrades, and I think we had like over 40 upgrades
Wow.
since mainnet because this. But I think like that kind of one of the concepts that indeed like it's a hard software engineering problem. The Web 2 solved it in two ways. One is everybody uses my servers, and I upgraded, and I have a huge DevOps team that actually does that because
Right.
it's a lot of pain. And there's like CI/CD, etc., but like it's still a lot of pain. I worked at Google, like one of the products had like, and not the biggest product, had, a 12 people team. They were launching an upgrade, and it was like a whole week of work for them to just upgrade that, like, and it was part of the back end of part of the service, right? It's not like in the whole thing. And I'm like, shouldn't this be like automatic? Like build the
Yeah.
software, launch it. But there's a lot of things that go into it. And then on a client side, right, we like every time you open your laptop, it asks you to upgrade something. Uh, you know, every time you launch a Zoom, it's trying to upgrade itself. So, and like you don't even know what's happening, like what code runs on your laptop anymore because it just like pushes the binaries to you all the time. So I think like, yeah, having a better systems for this are important. Having a way to track what software you run, who certified it, potentially,
Yeah.
what are the ways to authenticate that um, it's not like malicious software. And I think also one thing that I'm really looking forward is like having a audit registry and kind of bug bounty registry on chain where
Mm.
people can actually like report that like, hey, we reviewed this piece of software and it's like this is our kind of certification. And it doesn't need to be like public from the start, but they can commit to a hash and review it later. And same for bug reports and like critical issue vulnerability reports. Like right now, I can commit to a vulnerability on chain. And so everybody who uses the software will receive that there is a vulnerability and like its criticality level. And then I can reveal it later when it's already patched, and so this would allow to like, and potentially I reveal some information for people to like stay safe, but not reveal the way to actually exploit it.
I see.
But this now can create a more transparent marketplace for this, where people receive bug bounties for this. People actually who are very security critical can maybe not use the software, not use the smart contract, not use this wallet or whatever in the
Until
meantime,
it's
etc.
fixed.
Right? Like.
What's the reason to pre-commit to the vulnerability, like to put the hash in there?
Well, two things. One, well, I mean, it works as like economic incentive, right? Is you pre-commit to it, so you will receive some payout if it's true, and you will lose your bound, like your kind of whatever
Oh, you have to
the
put up some stake in order to
bond.
do this, like
Yeah,
a
there's some
bond.
bond to you will lose, yeah.
I see. Interesting.
But I mean, part of it is also so in blockchain space specifically because smart contracts you don't have an owner normally. I mean, like not normally, but there's many smart contracts that don't have an owner, right? Somebody just
Yeah.
deployed a smart contract and now it's there. So now imagine there's a vulnerability in the smart contract. So the best way to, like there's nobody to tell that there's vulnerability except to the users of the smart contract. So what you need to do, you need to inform everyone that this is a problem so that people withdraw money, but without revealing what the problem is. But
Yeah.
if you don't have any bond, right, people will spam like you can just spam it and like denial of service. So you
Mhm.
need some form of
Right.
both reputation and economics.
Yeah, and I guess you need some governance there too, right? Because you have to have some group of people who's responsible for evaluating the claim and saying, yeah, that was actually a vulnerability.
Yeah. Well, this is where like whoever runs a kind of the bug bounty or whatever the payout system, right? But presumably
Okay,
like
yeah.
for a blockchain, it makes sense for like a governance or whatever, have some amount of funds allocated for security. And so it's a public good security funding. And so like they allocate
Okay,
from
that's
that.
interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting kind of organizational structure for it too, right? Like, but yeah, I
Yeah, I
hadn't heard
mean,
of that
if you
arrangement.
have decentralized software, you need to have like a decentralized, security management as well, because there's nowhere to send an email to say like, hey, there's an issue here.
Yeah.
Like this was like I think that there was this story where there was a contract that had a vulnerability, but then I don't know, like 600 other people forked it and launched it on like BSC, and then people were like, we found a vulnerability, but it's like we don't even know who to tell about because it's like so prominent, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah, it's interesting. It sort of it reminds me of a lot of the other stuff that you guys are doing at Near, actually, right? I was thinking, okay, well, now that these decentralized systems are sort of being used, then what other kind of niceties, and other features need to be added to them to make them sort of fully featured, fully production level, and have the same kind of, level of not just like sort of, cryptographic security or sort of security in a hard sense, but like the sense of security, psychological security that you have from a Web 2 as a system as a user. Knowing that it works, knowing it's easy to use, knowing that you'll be able to do stuff, that there's some sort of recourse if something goes wrong.
yeah, I mean, there's like, foolproofing is literally a technical term. So it's not supposed to be like, pointing at anyone specifically, but it's just a general thing. Like I think even however technical people, we've all done something stupid that we shouldn't have with software. Like I've deleted my hard drive once completely and without backup when installing
I mean,
Linux. So
let him who hath not RM-RF to cast the first stone.
yeah, exactly. So there's like having protections for the users that are undoable. Like there's ways to say like I know what I'm doing. I want to like nuke my hard drive,
Right.
but making sure like hey, what you're doing right now is like planning to install a system on a drive that has a lot of data. Maybe you shouldn't.
Right.
Is important. So I think like that's a polish we're really missing, and it's clearly showing if you see like people getting hacked left and right with like not even that sophisticated systems, but indeed like this is the flip side right now of self-sovereignty that we need to address to really move this space forward.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, one of those, I mean, this could be a good segue into Boss, right? Because one of the places where users do get their money stolen is by either going to the wrong, by just trying to go to some website for a DApp, and either that DApp itself is malicious, or there's somehow the DNS gets spoofed, right? And you end up going to, instead of downloading the website that you think you're downloading that should be coming from that URL, you actually get some attacker's website, and your MetaMask gets drained, and you're never right. Like, and so there's part of an approach for dealing with this is to make sure that there's the what they call software supply chain security, right? Where it's like, okay, I'm getting this software, I want to run this software in my browser in a browser tab. Where is that software coming from, right? So there's a supply chain of how that software got into my browser, and you need to secure that whole chain so that some attacker can't sort of jump in at one of the links of the chain and swap out the code that's supposed to be running with something that just sends all the money to them, right? And so one big piece of this is to actually get the code from a blockchain where it's been signed, right, by a cryptographic key, and that also, if you know what the gateways are to get that code, who are relaying that code from the chain down into your browser, then this is a part of that story. So do you want to describe the boss stack?
Yeah, I mean we can dive into that. So as Ted described, I mean this approach is trying to solve a number of things. Some of them are on security side, some of them on just discoverability side. But yeah, I mean, the stack of the decentralized front ends allows to have kind of the application kind of front end code itself stored on blockchain, managed by potentially exactly the same way that smart contracts are managed. So you can ensure that this smart contract, for example, was deployed by this DAO or by this multisig or by this address. And so the same address have deployed the front end. There's actually even stronger relationship that you can build beyond that, which is you can require smart contract to, like, you can only operate from this front end with the smart contract. And so compliant gateways actually can enforce that and ensure additional security around that, like, you cannot use like some, kind of malicious front end as well.
How do you enforce that? Is that with
This would be enforced on like wallets, gateways side.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's like if your wallet presumably compliant with this protocol, now when it tries to send a transaction, if it's coming from a component that's not whitelisted, it like, hey, this is not valid, right?
Okay.
And same for gateway, like it would just like say, hey, this is invalid. And I mean, obviously, again, you can override this. So this is where, like, as a power user, you can do whatever you want from a command line kind of thing. But it allows to have like a very nice additional benefits around kind of security of just like you randomly, accessing something that's like trying to phish you. So that's kind of the system. And then there's gateways, which are, in a way like apps, websites, can be mobile app, can be wallet that actually renders this content from the blockchain and actually shows you the interfaces. And so the kind of one of the opportunities is to put these gateways as wide as possible, because they are pretty much a way to also have a censorship resistance, because as well as if you control the gateway, that enforces the kind of rules that you selected to, as well as removes a lot potentially tracking that you may not want for privacy reasons. And so that's where kind of partnership with Urbit came in as a way to receive a massive distribution for these gateways kind of across all of the personal servers that Urbit has.
Yeah, that was the first work that we did with NEAR, was to make it so that you can just install an app on your Urbit and then it can become a boss gateway, and so you can serve all the front ends from the NEAR chain through your own Urbit. And I remember being pretty surprised and impressed when I first heard about Boss, because I thought, okay, I didn't know that there were any chains where you could just store all the source code for a whole system on chain, and have that be something that's economically viable, right? I don't know how much it would cost to do that on Ethereum. I think something prohibitive.
All your money.
Yeah. So that was the first sort of taste I got of NEAR being a bit of a different beast from other blockchains, right? There's a different approach. And it makes a lot of sense, right? That is sort of where you want that kind of data stored. It's public, you want it signed. And the next thing that we're now, so we actually just added a new division to Urbit Foundation, and it's called Urbit Labs. And it's, the purpose of it is to build application level features, like infrastructure type stuff, mostly that's not in the Urbit operating system itself. It's in user space, so it's application level, but it's general purpose infrastructure. And so a lot of that Urbit Labs is collaborating with other organizations, largely but not exclusively in crypto. So now we have a few developers working full time there now, and they're one of their first projects is forking NEAR's NEAR social VM, so that it's Urbit aware. And so then So you can use, your Urbit ID and your NEAR ID, as part of, as part of the same system, and also forking the Boss VM, which runs in the browser. So that's the the thing that loads these components and runs the components that they downloads off chain. Forking that so that can speak to NEAR, and then through NEAR, of course, to other blockchains. But then also it'll be aware of your Urbit, so it could talk to your Urbit, right? So it could send commands, read data and send commands to your Urbit applications. So now you could write a front end. Once we have that, and the NEAR social VM, my understanding is that they're expecting to be done with that sometime this week. So I'm excited to see that. But the once you can write a front end that is loaded from the chain, right, and then it can talk to the chain, right, and it can also sit for doing anything public, right, moving money, contracts, right, and then also talk to your Urbit for doing anything private, or sort of private and social, like either just one person or small group, or a large group, but eventually that's a pretty powerful system, right? Now you have this sort of it's like a sort of full stack way of delivering, way of delivering software in this decentralized manner.
Yeah, I think, to double down, I think this idea that you can kind of in one application both use the kind of the public chain data, right? And again, NEAR, and through kind of the chain aggregation, chain abstraction we're doing, you'll be able to transact across all the blockchains, Bitcoin, Ethereum, EVM, Solana, etc. And at the same time, you can interact with your private data that's stored on your private server, and through that also connect to other people in the net, in kind of the Urbit network. I think that's very powerful, because now as a developer, before, for example, we had one of the developers who was building inside Boss synchronization, like for gaming or for something else, the things that you don't or can't put on public chain. And so this opens up kind of a very interesting ways to really build those applications where you can like create a, kind of on your Urbit server, spin up a state of the game, get other people to join, just kind of synchronize with it, play the game, deposit money, for example, into the pot based on who wins the game in Urbit, commit to that on chain to pay out, maybe then, run a tournament for other people to join. And so you can kind of continue like expanding the scope of that project. And so this kind of, pretty much a powerful primitive that adds this functionality.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you can start to see the way that you can, that the private and public data can start to work together, right? And you have, this sort of unified Web3 client that's in the browser or in some app, and it's talking to the, to NEAR and to Urbit. Even for the, that podcasting example earlier, right? A podcast app. It'd be cool if you could do SoundCloud style, like, you put a comment at some place in the audio stream, right? And then, that gets distributed to, people in your social graph or in some group that you're in that's sharing this thing around, right? And then you could, even maybe collaborate with, 5 other people in your social graph and do a, multi-sig through your Urbit, right? And some of that's off chain, right? It's done Urbit to Urbit to set up the multi-sig, right? And then they put something on chain, and then that starts up the subscription, right? Or you're bidding on some item or something, right? But you can imagine all these social things where you have a big off chain component that's doing a lot of social stuff that's quick, private. You don't need or want to put it on any kind of chain. But then at some point, one of those actions that you take as a group or as an individual ends up needing to go on chain, and you need that to integrate, right? And then also using the chain as the ultimate backstop for where the data is stored, where it's ultimately delivered from, how everybody gets sort of the baseline of agreement on all the sort of underlying facts of that software system. Then that just starts to, I think, look and feel pretty good, right? It's like then
Web3 works.
Exactly.
Starting to work, yeah. Yeah, so maybe we have like a few minutes left, so maybe we get some questions from the audience if there are any, because I
Sure.
think we can keep going at this for hours, and we have before. So,
Mhm. Yeah.
But yeah, definitely topics here to talk about for hours. Like really insightful stuff. I think a lot of people might have even gotten some really good ideas on things to kind of like keep top of mind while building, or kind of like good things to kind of take away from this Twitter Spaces in regards to developments. Like Ilya said, if anybody has any questions or any feedback or comments or anything they just have top of mind from any of the discussions today, feel free to request speaker, and I'm happy to get you up here with the few minutes we have left.
for example, if you want to know what's the next app to build, the killer app for all of the Web3, combining Urbit and NEAR and the chain abstraction ecstasy.
So I got Seth up here to he requested to speak. So if you're here, you are connected. Feel free to go ahead.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Yeah, I requested to speak earlier. I was appreciating the conversation about software supply chain security. It's like one of those boring, unsexy topics, but it's actually incredibly important and will only become more important. I think that we saw like with LedgerKit and the vulnerabilities recently, just how destructive potentially a software supply chain attack could be. And yeah, this is what we're working on at Archetype, and we're building on Urbit and we're building on NEAR. And yeah, if anyone wants to talk more about software supply chain security, love to chat.
Thanks, Seth.
Yeah, exciting.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for coming up here. Super excited stuff. If anybody else, I mean, it doesn't look like anybody else is requesting, but I'll give it another 30 seconds. If anybody else has any questions, anything they want to ask, provide any feedback. In the meantime, Theodore, Ilya, do you have anything else that you'd like to say in regards to Urbit's partnership on NEAR? Anything that you think you missed?
Well, I think actually we covered quite a bit of it. I think the maybe one thing we didn't discuss too much was we mentioned it a little bit offhand, but unifying the or not unifying, but getting sort of cross-linking between Urbit ID and NEAR ID. Yeah, because that's both Urbit and NEAR have sort of interesting approaches to that. And Urbit and NEAR both have namespaces that I think yours is also, and Urbit's namespace is referentially transparent, and I think NEAR's is also actually, but you do yours by block height to keep it referentially transparent, or block hash perhaps. But I don't know, that's something that we've discussed a bit in the past. And as for these namespaces and the IDs, they're ways of the namespace is a way of laying out data. It's sort of like a URL, and it can be converted into a web URL. Both NEARs and Urbits can be converted, so I think that's a way that the two systems could have a sort of deeper programmatic interaction as they're communicating in those namespaces.
Yeah, I mean, in general, with NEAR, we're trying to kind of create this mapping such that, if you have a NEAR account, ideally you have kind of mapping to addresses across, the whole Web3. So you're able to participate kind of really easily in any of the other systems. And so I think linking with Urbit makes a ton of sense. I think the other interesting thing that we haven't, I don't think we started working on, but we discussed around kind of the current ownership, right, of the address space is in this kind of non-materialized rollup on Ethereum that actually on NEAR you are able to fully materialize by just writing a smart contract that reads the state from Ethereum, which we are posting through Rainbow Bridge. So you have it actually fully available and secure. on Near. And so that would allow to actually link a lot of the address space related relationship as well to Near in an interesting way, and kind of link that back into the ID space too.
Yeah, that's an exciting idea.
So if anyone is interested in diving into Near Urbit intersection, that might be an interesting project.
Certainly.
So for everybody to think about, anybody that's building on Near Urbit, there you go. I think we have time for one more. We have one more request. Let's go ahead and get George Marlowe up here. And then I think that should be a wrap. All right, George, you're connected. Go ahead.
Hey guys, thanks again for taking the time to do this. I'm just gonna kind of prod y'all a little bit. So in a world where everything is developed and Urbit and Near are fully married and chain abstraction is here, could y'all compare how near.org on top of Urbit will look like google.com looks like today?
I mean, near.org is a gateway, right? So you're able to, open an app. Some apps will be, for example, the podcast listening app, right? And like you'll have, like it will connect to a personalized Urbit server, pull in the data from there, marry it with your kind of blockchain data, and show you the information. And you will see the same experience if you go to your Urbit server itself and kind of open the application there. You'll see the same if you go to any other gateway or app, etc. So like the idea is like that you kind of like right now we think of like, you go to Facebook and you see Facebook data, and that's the only place you can see Facebook data. And we kind of remove that, right? Your personal data is stored on Urbit, your kind of public data is stored on chain, and then the application code itself, lives on blockchain as well. And so now it doesn't matter where you go. You can get all those components cooked for you, right? Wherever you are, in exactly the same way, in predictable way, and now you can interact with them. So, and again, near.org is just going to be one of the, I mean, it is one of the gateways already. We have actually a gateway drop you can explore. And obviously, Urbits have this as well. So for folks who have Urbit, they can kind of install it and try it out.
Yeah, I can maybe end it on one little sort of user-facing vision. Imagine that you could, no matter where you go in the world, if you go and you see there's a computer screen and a keyboard and and so you can go up to that and you can type in a password, right, or do some other sort of login. Maybe you have your little hardware wallet and you just stick it in, or it does a little QR code back and forth, something like that. Something where you're using your private key to keep secure, but then you can sort of sign something to get access to this device, and this device actually goes and pulls your bunch of data off of blockchain and off of Urbit, right, based on that key, and downloads it into this sort of ephemeral client device. And so now, no matter where you go, you can just pick up where you left off, right? I just have like a little, maybe it's a ring, and I touch the ring to the computer, right? But there's some way that my private key can just sign something, and then I can get access to this device temporarily, and it'll start downloading based on that key, download whatever applications it needs. And now I don't even really need to own a full computer at any given time. I can just kind of pull up anything. Something like it. But that is done in this sort of objective manner in a way that's really not at the moment.
Okay, thank you. That quite literally blew my mind. That is extremely exciting to think about. One more question real quick. Will we see personal AI agents on Urbit and Near this year?
Oh yeah, the Native Planet built one already. It's a little slow. They called it Pen Pal, but there's a lot of activity in that space.
Pen Pal. Okay, I'll check it out. Thank you.
It's Pen Pal because it takes like a day to write you back.
Yeah. It's not quite that long, but it takes a little while. Yeah, so they'll have to bolt a GPU onto it to really get it going quick.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, George. Appreciate you coming up again. Great question. And yeah, that's all the time we have for today. And George, just on that, I mean, really good last question. But regarding AI, for everybody here, the next Illia series Twitter Spaces will be next week on Wednesday, the 24th. It will be an AI focused Twitter Spaces. And also, if you didn't catch opportunity, so definitely don't miss it. Look out for the tweets. And like I said earlier, this was also recorded in podcast format. So, expect to see this on Twitter in a video format as well. So appreciate you all being here and looking forward to having you on the next one. Take care, everybody. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.